You know how people say everything can change in a moment? I never believed that until the day a stranger offered me a seat in a cafe and somehow, without saying a word, saw the part of me that even I had buried. I wasn't looking for company. Truth be told, I'd spent months actively avoiding it. After the storm my life had become, losing my brother, burning out at work, and slowly disconnecting from people who once mattered, I'd built myself a private island of silence. I still functioned. I woke up, dressed well enough to pass, replied to emails with enough enthusiasm to fool my boss, but emotionally, I was flatlining. That Tuesday afternoon, I wandered into a cafe, not far from my apartment in Stonebridge. I didn't have a plan. I just wanted a warm drink and a place to pretend I wasn't falling apart. The cafe was alive with sound, baristas calling out orders, people laughing at things I couldn't hear, the tap-tap of fingers dancing on laptop keys. I took a seat in the back corner, far enough from the door to be invisible, close enough to the wall to feel contained. I nursed my drink like it was a shield, one that said, "Don't approach, don't talk, just let me be." Then she walked in. She didn't hesitate. She didn't fumble or search. Her eyes scanned the room quickly, and then, as if she had already made a decision before stepping through the door, she walked directly toward me. She moved with intention, not urgency, not impatience, just purpose. Her coat was buttoned neatly, a soft tan color with sleeves slightly rolled, and her scarf had the kind of casual drape that only comes from someone who's worn it for years. Her hair was tucked into a loose bun, a few strands falling gently around her cheeks. She carried a tray with a single mug, a small sandwich, and a notebook. Not a phone, not a laptop, a notebook. That already made her different. And then, without fanfare, she paused beside my table. There were other spots, at least 2 empty seats near the window and another across from a loud group of students. But she stopped at mine and asked, in the softest tone I'd heard all day, "Mind if I sit?" I looked up, a little startled. Her voice cut through the background noise, not by volume, but by clarity. She wasn't demanding or apologizing. She was simply asking. I hesitated. It wasn't a long pause, but in my head, everything slowed. My gut said no, my mouth said sure. She smiled. Not big, not theatrical, just warm. Then she sat down. No further comment, no awkward small talk. She just unwrapped her sandwich and took a sip from her mug, as if we had done this 100 times before. I didn't know what to do with her presence. It felt like a disruption, but not the kind that irritates you, more like when a breeze sneaks into a stuffy room. I stared down into my half-empty cup, feeling the old reflexes kick in. Retreat, close off, go still. That's what I'd trained myself to do. Hide behind indifference. But she didn't seem to need anything from me. She didn't fill the silence with pleasantries or force a conversation. Her calm was steady, almost meditative. And without realizing it, I started to breathe easier. I glanced at her tray. She was writing something in that notebook, slowly, intentionally. Her lips moved ever so slightly, like she was mouthing thoughts before they reached the page. She caught me looking and smiled again, this time without words. There was something unsettling about being seen. Not glanced at, not observed, but seen. It wasn't romantic, it wasn't even intimate in the traditional sense. It was human, and I hadn't felt that in a long time. That's when the first crack appeared in my wall. Not a dramatic breakdown, just a tiny fracture. The realization that maybe, just maybe, I didn't have to carry my silence alone. Some people carry energy like a flame. They walk into a room and everything orbits around them. But Clara, though I didn't know her name yet, was more like the sun through a window. She didn't demand attention. She made you aware of her by making space for you to exist beside her. As she slowly ate her sandwich, I began to notice her details. Her hands had fine veins, and a faint tremor ran through them when she reached for her cup. Not age, exactly, maybe a kind of tired grace. She had those smile lines etched around her mouth and eyes, the kind that come from years of choosing joy even when life doesn't make it easy. I tried to puzzle her out. Was she a counselor? A writer? A retired teacher? She had the air of someone who had seen people at their worst and didn't judge them for it. There was no attempt at performance from her, no fidgeting with a phone to appear busy, no exaggerated friendliness to make the silence feel less awkward. She wasn't trying to fix the moment. She was just in it, present. And that gentle presence did something to me. It made me feel like I could sit there, broken and incomplete, and not be a problem that needed solving. I didn't plan to speak. I'd made a quiet vow to just let the moment pass. But the longer we sat there, the more her silence stopped feeling foreign. It was familiar, calming. And in that safety, my curiosity bubbled up, quietly at first, then louder until I had to let it out. "Do you always sit with strangers?" I asked, finally. My voice cracked with disuse, and I instantly regretted speaking, thinking maybe I'd broken whatever peaceful spell had settled over the table. But she laughed, a soft, genuine chuckle. "Only when they look like they need a seat more than I do." That line, it hit me right in the gut. Not pitying, not patronizing, just true. I needed something that day, and maybe she saw it before I did. The tension in my shoulders eased. I looked at her properly this time, past the coat and scarf and quiet manner. "Do you work around here?" I asked. She nodded. "Just a few blocks down. I run a second-hand bookstore. Quiet place, lots of character. People come for books, but stay for conversation." That felt like her, a woman who sold stories yet never forced her own. And in that moment, I realized I wanted to know hers. In a world obsessed with speed, fast replies, faster commutes, instant gratification, Clara seemed immune to the rush. As we spoke, or rather, shared the occasional sentence between thoughtful pauses, I noticed something rare. She wasn't in a hurry. She wasn't glancing at a watch or checking her phone for the time. She wasn't making polite excuses to leave, nor was she filling silence out of social obligation. She was simply there. That quiet commitment to being present struck me. It told me something about her before she ever explained herself. Clara valued presence over productivity, people over pace. She was the kind of person who paused for strangers and lingered over tea, not because she had nothing to do, but because she understood the value in slowing down. It unnerved me at first. I was used to people treating time like a transaction, get what you need and move on. But Clara was more like a gardener, patient, attentive, unbothered by silence. At one point, she asked me what I was reading. It was a novel I'd picked up weeks ago and barely touched. I fumbled through an answer, not because I didn't know, but because I wasn't used to anyone asking. Her interest didn't feel forced, it felt human. And for the first time in ages, I felt like more than a passing shadow. The strange thing about safety is that you only realize it's there after you've let your guard down. That's what happened with Clara. I didn't decide to tell her anything personal. There was no plan. But somewhere between sips of lukewarm coffee and her quiet observations, I heard myself say something I hadn't shared with a single soul in months. "I lost my brother earlier this year." Just like that. The words came out unpolished, brittle around the edges, but true. I didn't elaborate. I didn't need to. The sentence sat between us like a candle, delicate, flickering, real. Clara didn't gasp. She didn't press for details or blurt out well-meaning cliches. She looked me straight in the eye and said, "I'm sorry. That kind of loss echoes." That word, echoes, was exactly right. Because grief wasn't loud for me anymore. It was a whisper that lived in the corners of my day, showing up uninvited in quiet moments, in coffee shops, in faces that resembled his. Her reply told me she understood, not because she had studied grief, but because she had felt it. And in that quiet agreement, I didn't feel so alone. I hadn't expected to find a mirror in a stranger, but somehow she reflected my silence back to me with compassion. The name came as casually as a passing breeze. I don't remember exactly what triggered it. Perhaps I asked, or perhaps she offered. But when she said, "I'm Clara, by the way," it landed with a sense of permanence. Clara. A simple name, soft on the tongue, but full of character. It suited her, in the same way that worn leather suits an old book, gently aged, but full of stories. I told mine in return, feeling like the introduction marked a subtle shift. We were no longer anonymous, no longer two people sharing a table out of convenience. Names have a way of anchoring people to memories, and Clara was no longer just the woman from the café. She had a name, a place in my mental archive. It made everything feel more real, like this interaction wasn't a fleeting accident, but something worth remembering. We talked a little more, lightly drifting from books to weather to her shop down the road. She told me it smelled like old pages and cinnamon from a bakery next door. I imagined her there, arranging shelves, chatting with regulars, scribbling notes in her old notebook between customers. And I found myself thinking, maybe I'd visit that bookstore someday. After that day, something strange happened. The café, the very same one I used to sit in like a ghost, began to change. Or maybe I changed. The walls didn't shift, the coffee didn't taste different, and the same indie playlist played from behind the counter, but it all felt warmer, less like a hiding place, more like a part of the world again. I started noticing details I had ignored before, the way the barista smiled at regulars, the quiet laughter at the corner table, the older man who always read the newspaper by the window. Clara had somehow flipped a switch in me, not with a lecture or therapy session, but with her quiet presence and an empty seat. That small gesture rewired how I viewed public spaces. They weren't obstacles to be navigated, they were opportunities. And each time I returned, I half hoped I'd see her again. Sometimes I did. Sometimes I didn't. But even when she wasn't there, her absence didn't feel like a loss. It felt like a reminder that people, real people, can touch your life in a single moment and leave you better for it. The cafe hadn't changed, but I couldn't walk through the door without remembering what it had become, a place where I had started to feel alive again. It's strange how a single moment can become a ritual without you realizing it. That's what happened to me. What began as an unintentional stop to escape the noise of life slowly evolved into a daily practice. I didn't just visit the cafe anymore, I returned to it, like one returns to a sacred place. Each time I went, I carried the memory of Clara's kindness with me. It didn't matter if she was there or not. Her presence had planted something deeper, a sense of connection, a desire to engage, a willingness to sit with discomfort rather than hide from it. And something else started to change. I began to notice people. Really notice them. I saw the young mother struggling with 2 kids and offered to help her carry her tray. I nodded at the lonely elderly man near the entrance. I smiled more often. I listened more closely. One day, a young man looked around nervously, tray in hand, and I surprised myself by saying, "You can sit here if you like." He paused, clearly not expecting it, then smiled, nodded, and joined me. I realized I wasn't just healing, I was becoming someone new. Someone who had once been seen and now chose to see others. It took me a while to realize that Clara was speaking to me all along, even when she wasn't saying anything. Her silence had a language of its own, subtle, intentional, comforting. Most people talk to fill space, to avoid awkwardness, to control the moment. Clara didn't do that. She let silence breathe. And in that space, something powerful happened. I listened. Not just to her, but to myself. One rainy afternoon, we shared a table again. We said very little, just exchanged smiles, a few casual questions, nothing deep. But in her company, the silence felt full, not empty. It held room for pain and peace at the same time. Before she left, Clara scribbled something on a napkin and passed it to me with her usual gentle smile. I unfolded it after she walked out the door. It read, "Be kind. Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about." That quote clung to me like warmth on a cold day. She hadn't just given me words, she'd given me permission to live differently. To pause. To observe. To approach others without fear. Her silence wasn't avoidance, it was grace. It told me, you don't have to explain everything to be understood. Before Clara, I kept my interactions brief, safe, impersonal. I dodged eye contact on the subway. I let phone calls go to voicemail. I answered texts with emojis and vague replies. Avoidance had become my defense. People meant risk, and after losing someone I loved, I wasn't willing to let anyone close enough to hurt me again. But something about her cracked that armor open, not in a grand, dramatic way, but slowly, like light filtering through a curtain. The more time I spent reflecting on that first encounter, the more I realized how deeply I'd isolated myself. So I started small. I held doors open longer. I made real conversation with my barista instead of just mumbling my order. I responded to messages from friends I hadn't spoken to in months. I even rejoined a small book club I had once loved but abandoned. It wasn't easy. Vulnerability never is. There were moments where I still retreated, where I feared being misunderstood. But Clara had shown me that human connection isn't about being perfect. It's about being present. And once I allowed myself to be present with others, the fear started to fade. People didn't stop hurting, but they started healing me too. Before Clara, I never questioned why I sat alone on trains, avoided eye contact in elevators, or hesitated to speak to someone beside me in public. It was just what people did. You don't talk to strangers. You don't share tables. You keep your headphones in and your thoughts to yourself. It was the invisible rule book of modern life, followed religiously, unquestioned. But Clara broke that rule with one simple question. Mind if I sit? That one act flipped everything. It made me realize how often we avoid connection because we've been taught to. Somewhere along the way, society convinced us that kindness is weird, that openness is naive, and that privacy is strength. But sitting across from Clara that day felt like a quiet rebellion. It made me question how many invisible fences I'd built, not just around me, but between me and others. Since then, I've started stepping over those boundaries more often. I compliment strangers. I strike up conversations on park benches. And when I feel awkward, I remember that awkwardness is a sign of change, not failure. Clara didn't break social norms to make a point. She did it because she saw people, not rules. And now, so do I. Clara wasn't some glowing saint or mystical guide sent to transform my life. She was just a woman in a café, holding a tray and wearing a tired scarf. She didn't walk in with fanfare, and she didn't leave behind fireworks. But she changed me, quietly, permanently. That's the thing about extraordinary people. They don't always come wrapped in drama or spectacle. Sometimes they arrive wrapped in kindness, in calm, in humanity. Clara didn't try to fix me. She didn't probe into my past or lecture me about grief. She didn't offer advice or promises. She just showed up with a gentle spirit and an open seat. And that, it turned out, was more powerful than anything else. The world is full of loud people, those who need to be heard, need to dominate every space they enter. Clara wasn't one of them. She didn't push her energy into the room. She shared it. And in doing so, she reminded me that kindness doesn't need permission, and impact doesn't need applause. Empathy is often misunderstood. People think it has to be earned, or that you need to know someone's story before you can care about them. But Clara taught me the opposite. She didn't know my history. She had no idea about my pain, my sleepless nights, my inner emptiness. And still, she offered empathy. Not because she had a reason, but because she saw someone who might need it. And that was enough. She didn't press me with questions or require a confession. She simply sat with me, present, without judgment. Her empathy wasn't a transaction. It was a gift, a soft offering that said, "You're safe here." Since then, I've tried to live the same way, to stop waiting for people to deserve kindness, and just give it freely. I hold space for strangers without needing their backstory. I listen longer. I interrupt less. I reach out even when there's no clear benefit. Because Clara showed me what true empathy looks like. Proactive, unearned, unconditional. You don't need to know someone's pain to help them carry it. Sometimes all it takes is sharing your table. And now I keep one seat open, always. After that day, and the days that followed, I began to wonder how many lives Clara had quietly touched. How many people had she sat beside without fanfare? How many broken spirits had she unknowingly helped piece together with nothing more than presence and patience? She wasn't a celebrity. She didn't have a podcast or a blog sharing nuggets of wisdom, but somehow she carried this light, this unassuming warmth that made others feel like they mattered. And that got me thinking. If I had walked away that day without saying yes to her seat request, would I still be stuck in my shell? Would I still be numbing myself with distraction, pretending grief didn't wear me like a coat? Clara had probably forgotten the moment she shared with me by the time she walked out that door. But I hadn't. I couldn't. That's the thing about people like her. They don't try to change lives. They just do, because kindness is their default setting. She probably has no idea she's in this story right now. And yet here I am, weeks later, still remembering her voice, her calm, her napkin quote, and the gentle gift of her attention. I'm certain I'm not the only one. That chair, just a simple wooden seat in a crowded cafe, ended up being one of the most important places I've ever sat in my life. It wasn't about comfort, or the view, or the coffee. It was about what that chair represented. It was a bridge. A bridge from loneliness to connection, from numbness to presence, from silence to meaning. Before that moment, I'd carried my grief like armor, convinced that retreating from people was the only way to avoid more pain. But Clara's decision to sit beside me, not out of obligation, not out of pity, but out of choice, showed me that healing doesn't always require words. Sometimes it just needs proximity. Every time I pass that table now, I pause for a second. I don't do it consciously. It's like muscle memory. That table will always be more than furniture to me. It's where I started to come back to life. And it taught me something I never expected. Small moments can be enormous. A smile, a question, a shared seat. These aren't just gestures, they're anchors. They tether us back to humanity when we're drifting too far out. And for me, that seat was exactly that. An anchor in a storm I didn't know how to survive. The world hasn't magically transformed. People are still busy, distracted, guarded. We pass each other on sidewalks with eyes glued to screens, earbuds blocking out the hum of life. But something's changed in me. Now, I smile first. Not because I'm suddenly fearless or healed completely, but because I've realized that maybe someone else is having a day like I once had. Maybe someone else is carrying invisible grief, wrestling with doubts, or aching to be noticed. So, I meet them halfway. I don't wait to be seen, I choose to see. I hold elevator doors. I offer my seat. I ask how the barista's morning is going, and mean it. It's not about being perfect or constantly upbeat. It's about making room, creating micro moments of connection, just like Clara did for me. Not every moment becomes a story. Most don't. But every so often, I see it in someone's eyes, that flicker of surprise, then relief. The silent thank you that says, "I needed this today." And I realize, I'm not just living my life anymore. I'm passing on a gesture. Clara smiled first. Now it's my turn. Clara didn't announce her departure. There was no dramatic farewell, no final conversation with tears or closure. One day, she simply wasn't there. I returned to the café like usual, half hoping to catch her eye, maybe sit together again. But the seat across from me stayed empty. And again the next day, and the day after that. At first, I felt a strange ache. I had questions. Had she moved? Was she okay? Did she know what her presence had done for me? But slowly, that longing gave way to something softer. Gratitude. Because Clara didn't owe me more time. Her gift wasn't measured by repetition, it was in the moment itself. That first day and every quiet moment after was enough. Some people exit your life quietly, but leave behind echoes that last far longer than words. Clara was one of those people. She gave me a part of herself, her stillness, her empathy, her humanity, and trusted me to carry it forward. And I do. Every time I offer my own seat, every time I pause and listen without needing to respond. Our goodbye wasn't spoken, but I think she knew she had left something with me, and I'll carry it always. If you've followed this story all the way here, I want to leave you with something simple but powerful. The next time you're in a cafe or on a train or in a waiting room, offer the seat. Smile first. Speak gently. Notice someone. You don't have to fix people. You don't have to dig into their lives or carry their pain, but you can make space for them. And sometimes that's all a person needs. A little space, a little warmth, a signal that they're not invisible. I didn't know how much I needed Clara until she sat down. I didn't realize how empty I felt until someone silently filled that space with kindness. And now, I've made it my quiet mission to do the same, one seat at a time. So if this story resonated with you, even in a small way, subscribe, stick around. Let's build something together, a community that values connection, empathy, and presence. Because the truth is, this world needs more Claras, and maybe you're the next one.